In the Mecklenburg Lake District of northern Germany, nature once displayed its gentlest side. The waters of the Havel River were crystal clear, and swans preened their feathers leisurely on the banks. Had you visited here in the 1930s, you would have thought it a piece of paradise left on earth. Yet, by this very lake, the residents of the town of Furstenberg witnessed the groundbreaking ceremony of a nightmare in the spring of 1939. Hitler personally selected this coordinate. He didn't just want to build a concentration camp, he wanted to build a soul grinder specifically for women. There was no deafening roar of industrialized slaughter like in Auschwitz, but there was a colder, bone-deep suppression. Ravensbrück, the name means Bridge of Ravens in German. Under this name, 130,000 women from Poland, the Soviet Union, France, the Netherlands, and even Germany itself were forced onto this long bridge leading to hell. Among them were resistance members who passed intelligence in the dark for their homelands, Romani women destined for doom because of their identity, and female teachers who simply refused to swear loyalty to the swastika. They were mothers, wives, and daughters, but after crossing that gray stone gate, all their social identities were swallowed by a collective fate called prisoner. This is not just a history of death, it is an epic of how women fought using their fingernails, their hair, and their faint breath under the most extreme logic of dehumanization. When the cattle cars loaded with cargo opened at the Ravensbrück platform, the cold air lunged forward along with the screams of the SS female guards. These supervisors, known as Aufseherin, wore sharp gray uniforms and held fierce wolves on leashes. Many of them had been ordinary sales clerks or domestic workers before the war, but under the temptation of power, they rapidly alienated into beautiful beasts. The first step was to dismantle a woman's last shred of self-respect. They were driven into massive disinfection rooms and forced to strip naked in full view. This display was not a medical check, it was a spiritual rape. The Nazi barbers were crude, the long hair they had once carefully nurtured fell in heaps on the filthy floor like withered grass. A French survivor recalled, "When the last lock of golden hair fell, I heard a low sobbing all around. It was the funeral music of our farewell to our past lives." Then came the cold water rinse and the blue and white striped uniforms reeking of bleach. Colored triangular patches were sewn onto their chests, red for political prisoners, black for asocials, and purple for Jehovah's Witnesses. Their names vanished, replaced by a cold number. From that moment on, you were no longer the hope of a family, you were merely a unit of labor to be consumed. Every day at 3 a.m., they had to stand for roll call in the biting wind for hours. If someone collapsed, she was met with the guard's whip and the wolf's bite. In this extreme environment, the Nazis tried to turn them into breathing machines, but they underestimated the resilience hidden under their skirts. Deep within the camp lay a building strictly isolated by barbed wire, District 4, the notorious Revere Infirmary. This was no sanctuary for healing, but a human factory for Dr. Gebhardt and his team. To find specific drugs for gangrene and battle wounds for the German front lines, the Nazis chose 74 young Polish women as live experimental subjects. These girls were called Kaninchen, rabbits, because like lab rats, they were cut open, observed, and discarded at will. The process was excruciatingly cruel. Doctors intentionally slashed open the girls' thighs, stuffing contaminated glass shards, rusty nails, and soil into muscle to simulate real trench infections. To observe bone regeneration, they even sawed through the prisoners' shins without anesthesia. A girl named Jadwiga once wrote, "The lights in the operating room flickered like ghost fires." I could clearly feel the touch of the blade across the periosteum. At that moment, I prayed to God for death, but I knew I had to live to witness this inhuman atrocity. However, in such despair, these rabbit girls showed incredible solidarity. Using the faint light in the infirmary and urine as ink, they secretly recorded the dates of surgeries, the names of doctors, and the conditions of victims on scraps of paper. These scraps were sewn into the linings of uniforms and passed through layers of hands, eventually reaching the outside world in London. They were warning the world with their lives. Here, civilization had completely collapsed. Whenever a rabbit girl was taken for execution, other female prisoners would spontaneously hum low songs outside the barracks, the only requiem in hell. If the Nazi goal was to regress humans into starving beasts, the women of Ravensbrück fought back in a way that was nearly absurd yet profoundly noble. They hosted lavish banquets in their minds. This was the famous mental cooking. In the nighttime whispers, you would hear, "Madeline, what have you prepared today?" The former Parisian chef would close her eyes and describe in a raspy voice, "Today, we have bœuf bourguignon. First, we select the finest Burgundy wine. The fire must be low, letting the meat slowly absorb the richness of the herbs." The surrounding women would swallow dryly. In that moment, the air seemed to truly carry the scent of cinnamon and red wine. This collective memory of civilized life became their strongest weapon against nihilism and despair. Resistance existed beyond fantasy. In the Siemens factory, female prisoners launched unprecedented industrial sabotage. They jammed sand into precision instruments or sabotaged screws so that weapons would fail on the battlefield. In the corners of the barracks, Czech teachers secretly taught children poetry on the backs of scrap paper. Soviet female soldiers passed intelligence through glances during roll call. They established mother-daughter groups, where older women adopted younger girls as virtual daughters. This warmth, rooted in female nature, formed an unyielding fortress against the cold Nazi logic of power. By early 1945, the veins of the Third Reich were dry. As Soviet artillery shattered the glass of Ravensbrück, the SS began their final erasure. They wanted no evidence left behind. 30,000 frail women were driven into the snow for the infamous Death March. It was a road paved with corpses. A body fell every kilometer, every gunshot signaled the end of a soul. The prisoners clung to each other, knowing that to let go was to stay in the snow forever. Then, a miracle appeared. Through the mediation of the Swedish Red Cross, Count Bernadotte convinced the desperate Nazi high command to allow the white buses into the danger zone. These snow-white vehicles, marked with large red crosses, became the only ark on the edge of hell. When the doors opened and a Swedish driver handed out a clean towel and a bottle of water, many women broke down in tears. They had not been treated as human for so long. For those who could not board, the Red Army pushed open the gates in late April. Soldiers hardened by war wept at the sight of rabbit girls with amputated legs and mountains of shoes beside the crematorium. In 1946, justice began in a Hamburg courtroom. Karl Gebhardt, the butcher who called himself a scientific pioneer, lied repeatedly, claiming his experiments were for the welfare of humanity. However, the surviving Polish girls stood up. When they rolled up their sleeves and pant legs in front of the world to show their deformed, rotting limbs, the courtroom fell into a deathly silence. Gebhardt was ultimately sent to the gallows. The once mighty female guards were either executed or sentenced to long imprisonments. They wept, claiming they were only ordinary followers of orders, but this could not hide the evil of the lives they had snuffed out. The trials were not just punishment for the killers, but a long overdue restoration of dignity for the victims. Today, the site of Ravensbrück is a peaceful memorial. Every year, people from around the world come to this lakeside. The wind is no longer freezing, but the tremors of history remain. We record this history not just to expose evil, but to remember the women who, in despair, insisted on mending uniforms, sharing bread, and whispering poetry. Ravensbrück tells the world, you can strip a person of her name and destroy her body, but as long as this mutual aid and dignity exist, darkness can never truly rule the dawn.